I'm Matt Wilhelmy. I'm the owner of Strategic Voyages Business Consultants. I'm also the author of Taboo Business Questions, What's Haunting Every Entrepreneur's Growth. And today, I'm joined by Rebecca Schuette. She is a startup veteran with roots in the agency space. She's also the founder and chief marketer at Start to Scale. She's a fractional CMO who does all things venture capital and private equity focused on startups. Rebecca, thanks so much for joining me today.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Matt. I'm really excited to dive in and chat together.
Yeah, one of the things that really kind of stood out to me about your background was kind of where you came from, your roots, how you cut your teeth. I think a lot of people consider themselves chief marketing officers, but they don't necessarily have the street cred that you do. And so I'm wondering if maybe you can bring our audience into some of those details. What does that look like? What was your background in marketing kind of before you went out on your own?
Yep. Yeah. So I started my career in the advertising space. So I worked with big brands like Volkswagen of America. I ran GMC.com for a year. And then I also worked at a small boutique agency out in San Diego when I needed to thaw out my New England roots for a few years. And it was great. An amazing place to work and really build my foundation in data-driven marketing and customer storytelling, brand storytelling. I got to work on some really, really exciting things. So I managed a TV campaign for the new Beetle right when the Apple iPod launched. So that's dating me a bit, but it was exciting work, groundbreaking work. I still have an email forwarded to me by Steve Jobs, which was a nice career high point about that particular campaign. So it was exciting, great work. Advertising space, they work you hard in your 20s. I had a lot of fun. I made not a lot of money, but got to manage great brands with big budgets and worked with a lot of great friends. What I recognized when I was there was that again, that foundation was amazing for me. But I recognized I wanted to get closer to solving business challenges with kind of the mind of a marketer, the voice of the consumer speaking loudly in my mind. So I left the agency space. I dove into early stage startups and really found my sweet spot. I've not looked back since. So I've stayed at kind of the Series A, Series B startup world, a little bit of Series C. But really what I like to do is kind of that growing stage. So going from 0 to 1 and then scaling 1 to N and iterating throughout the time. So figuring out, do we need to pivot the go-to-market model? Do we need to tweak our messaging? Do we need to enhance the product to better serve the customer? Started in a B2C startup, and then otherwise I've been in the B2B space my entire startup career. And that's what I'm now doing on a fractional basis for B2B startups.
Yeah, I was going to say, so you kind of took this really interesting opportunity in your 20s to work with some really big companies. And now you've kind of brought a lot of these big picture, big ideas down into, I don't want to say smaller ideas, but you've certainly translated that skill set and that ability to kind of have that same voice and have that same presence and have some of those similar strategies work for some technology companies. You mentioned B2B and tech. And so what are some of those common issues that you're seeing when you've got a potential client you're talking to and maybe they're thinking that their issues are unique and you're like, actually, they're kind of not. What are some of those kind of commonalities that you see?
Yeah, I think a lot of the times when I'm brought in, the CEO, like most startups, they're trying to be as scrappy as possible. They're trying to make their dollars stretch as far as possible. So oftentimes they've brought in, maybe a junior level marketer. So somebody who has 1 or 2 years out of college, they're eager to learn, but they do not have, a strategic background. And so in that instance, departments, most of the time the marketing is quite reactive in nature. So the CEO sees this nice shiny thing and says, oh, we've got to go do that. There's an event for our industry. We absolutely have to be at that event. So, that junior marketer will throw something together really quickly, but does not have the background in strategy. So they haven't yet built out, okay, what does the pre-event workflow look like? What am I going to do when I'm actually at the event? And then once I've gathered all these leads, what am I going to do to nurture these to turn these leads that show up at an event into actual revenue? So that's one of the things, just going from reactive to an actual proactive strategy. The other thing that also often happens, sales and marketing, I think when they're working great, there should be some healthy tension between the two departments, but they should be working together and they should be informing one another and building these strategies together. Oftentimes when I come in, I recognize, there's a lot of distrust between sales and marketing. Sales is telling you, oh, these leads suck. The marketing team is saying, no, sales just can't close the leads. They're not doing the job. And most of the time, neither of those things are true. They're just not communicating well. So really bringing those teams together and making sure they're working well and informing future revenue growth. And then another big challenge that I see is just a lack of predictability in their revenue. So there probably aren't the systems and processes that you would see in a much more mature organization when you are just, bringing on your first, hundreds or even 1,000 customers. They're just missing that predictability. So again, building a scalable pipeline so that when your board tells you, hey, you're going to hit X million dollars of revenue this next quarter, you actually can reliably hit that.
Yeah, that's a great transition into my next question for you, Rebecca, which is kind of related to your background, but maybe a little more recent background, because one of the reasons that I'm really interested in getting your perspective on this case study we're about to talk about is because of your success in helping companies really kind of develop that marketing strategy, that sales strategy, maybe fusing those together to really kind of allow them to have the right conversations with investors and really kind of knowing that not everybody does that the same, not everybody does that well. And you've got some successes in your, arsenal of great stories that you're able to draw upon. And so I'm wondering how many times those kinds of conversations come up when you're talking to potential clients.
Yeah, so you're always performing for your board, and you need to hit those metrics that you lay out there, and so absolutely being able to reliably set goals and the right goals for the company and then hit those goals, that comes up at every single startup I've ever worked with.
Great. The case study that I wanted to talk to you about, Rebecca, is related to a SaaS company. That's in your wheelhouse, right? They basically provide a service to higher ed. And one of the things that they noticed that when they brought me in was that they were having a hard time kind of converting sales. And so to your point, they definitely said, the marketing team and the sales team were in a room. They kind of one of these where they're pointing at each other. And it was not fun for me just because that's not my specialty. I really don't speak either one of those languages. I usually wear the CFO hat, but they brought me in to kind of look at their books and to kind of see if their financials were kind of where it needed to be to go and seek out some investor funds. But when I noticed that there was this tension and this distrust between the marketing and the sales, I knew that there was probably a lot more going on. And so what I'm wondering is if you could maybe help unpack this business issue a little bit.
Yeah.
How do you really kind of get to the bottom of it? What are the questions that you ask when you're talking to somebody like this?
Yeah, so hearing the beginning of the problem here, I'd first dive in and just say, hey, can you describe to me your sales process as it exists today, and what role does marketing play in this sales process?
Yeah, so I would say that at the moment their marketing process is that they have a blog and they have some other kind of content that they've produced. And so they're just kind of hoping that it hits the right keywords and they're kind of found organically. And then when the leads kind of come through the website, whether it's joining their newsletter list or, you know, people requesting a demo, for example, then their sales team kind of jumps into action. And so I would assume that this is not like a totally unique sales strategy and marketing strategy, right? You've seen this one all the time, content development strategy.
Yeah. So absolutely. Content development, I think, is great at building that top of funnel, both awareness and conversion. But, you know, marketing should be woven through your entire sales process. It shouldn't just be a pure handoff. Okay, the lead's there and now sales runs with it. You know, I think when sales and marketing are really in sync, that's when you're actually turning to each other to solve problems together at different layers of the funnel. So that's where, you know, when I'm delving in, what role does marketing play? Is there storytelling woven throughout the sales process, or is that something that, you know, maybe this organization could benefit from? Another thing that, you know, I think is always helpful to delve in is like, okay, so it sounds like there's some drop off, but talk to me more about this. So what specific challenges are you facing in your sales and marketing efforts today?
Yeah, I mean, again, I was just kind of listening to the conversations, but the more and more I talk to other industry folks, the more I realize that these probably are not unique happenings. But at the time, what was kind of going on was when the chief person in charge of sales was basically saying that the sales are closing just fine. That's not a problem. But the leads that are coming in are looking for things that maybe the software doesn't do. And so it's almost like a product issue, but the salesperson was so confident that they were able to overcome these objections. That's what he called them. And so they didn't have any issues with sales, but I can see you smirking and smiling. So like, this is probably, again, not unique, but what do you do there? How do you kind of dig in deeper to understand what's going on?
So yeah, I mean, sometimes, so when you see those early leads that are dropping off, there are probably a bunch of root causes, but there are two that I would normally bucket them into. So one, are we not going after the right leads? And then the other side is, okay, these are the right people, but we're not telling the right story to this person. So both of that, I think, comes down to defining things kind of even earlier in your marketing strategy. So one, I'd ask them, you know, who is your ideal customer profile and how did you develop that? So that's going to give me information on, one, does it exist today? Because there are a number of startups that are like, we don't know that yet. We're going to sell to anyone and everyone. And that normally means that your product means nothing to anyone. So you do want to refine that. And then how did you develop it? Will give me insight into how data-driven is your organization. Is this based on existing customers and how they are responding to your product, or is it based on market research that you've done in the past? So those, I think, are important questions to find out. Yeah,
when I was talking to them, I generally want to see data as well, because that's how I evaluate things. I'm not really a gut person. I might, you know, take that into account, but if I can't see it on a spreadsheet, or if I don't understand the numbers, it doesn't usually mean a whole lot to me. And so when they were talking to me about their dashboard and their reports, they didn't really have enough visibility, in my opinion, to be able to see really what was going on, because all they had was their Salesforce platform that wasn't really fully built out. They were kind of keeping it like a CRM, but it wasn't really producing data beyond close rates. And I would imagine as a marketer, there's a lot more data that's available that you'd want to know. And maybe we can jump into some of those specifics later on. But I'm wondering, Rebecca, before we kind of transition off of this case study and maybe even summarize some of the issues, were there any other questions that you'd want to ask to kind of gain some clarity into maybe the root causes of some of these issues?
Yeah, well, I speak similar language to you as a CFO. I'm very data driven. So one of the things that I like to know coming in is, what is your sales and marketing tech stack today? What are the KPIs that you are paying attention to today? And again, that will just give me insight into what's the baseline, because some of this I think sometimes can be solved by data. You need that data to figure out exactly what is going wrong here and where is the biggest opportunity for optimization.
Well, I would say that their data is non-existent
Yeah.
because you need a lot more than just a close rate, to
Yep.
really be an effective marketer. But, I really enjoy working with CMOs and fractional CMOs like yourself who want to see the data and want to kind of see the proof in the pudding and sit in a meeting sometimes, just kind of smiling and nodding, waiting for somebody to show me some numbers because it's
Yep.
really tough to make any decisions until we get there. But I think that one of the most effective things that CMOs can do is build alliances across the aisle, so to speak, with those CFOs, because, we're not fighting against each other. We should be working in unison. And
Absolutely.
so, as much as I do sometimes wonder where the marketing budget goes, when marketers saying, I need more, I need more, I need more, it should be a partnership. We should be on
Absolutely.
the same page. And so I'm really encouraged to hear that that's your approach as well. Well, hey, I wanted to do a quick summary and then we can move into some cautionary tales. But just to remind folks of where we're at, I'm talking with Rebecca Schuette. She is a startup veteran with roots in the agency space, founder and chief marketer at Start to Scale. She's a fractional CMO focused on the venture capital and private equity spaces. We just got done kind of unpacking this case study where Rebecca was very surgeon-like and diligent in unpacking some of their issues, because oftentimes when businesses have presenting issues, there are those deeper underlying issues that we need to address. And so for this particular case study, they were presenting some distrust between sales and marketing. What we found out was they were certainly overcoming objections, but perhaps the marketing was producing the wrong leads, and maybe marketing wasn't even telling the right story. And finally, what we determined was that they didn't really have the right visibility into the data, into the dashboard. And so we're not solving these issues just yet. We're going to save that for our third episode. But before we get there, I do often like to take some time to chat with my guests about some cautionary tales. And so in our next episode, Rebecca is going to join me for a little bit of storytelling, where we're going to talk about a couple of different cautionary tales. These are stories where folks maybe don't take the advice, maybe kind of execute it wrong, and kind of what happens. And so one of the stories that we're going to talk about is this fallacy of thinking that marketing is really only there to fill the top of the funnel, and what that actually means to the organization. The second one is a SaaS company that travels. The second one is a SaaS company who thought events were a waste of money. And so that's interesting. That sounds like a business that I've worked with, but I'm sure that that's not super uncommon. So again, I'm joined by Rebecca Schuette, and I hope everybody joins us for our second episode. Stay tuned.